The Great Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal. Representatives from 10,000 worlds sat in their designated sections, speaking in hundreds of languages that translator devices converted into meaning. For 50,000 years, this place had kept the peace. For 50,000 years, the galaxy had known order. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the human section, a small booth near the back. Humans were new here. Only 250 years had passed since Earth's first contact with alien life. In galactic terms, that made them babies. Most species barely noticed when human representatives spoke. Chen watched the emergency session with growing frustration. On the main display, images flickered. Cities burning, bodies in the streets, orbital bombardments turning oceans into steam. The Varini homeworld was dying and the Council was talking. The Korthax hegemony had started their expansion 3 years ago. They were a species that believed in strength above all else. Their ships were powerful, their warriors were brutal. They had conquered 4 smaller civilizations already, and the Council had done nothing but issue warnings. "We must consider all options," said the Zeltari representative, his 3 heads nodding in unison. "Perhaps stronger economic sanctions?" "The Korthax do not care about trade," replied a delegate from the Minervan Collective. "They take what they want." "Then we increase diplomatic pressure," suggested another voice. "We can issue a formal condemnation." Chen felt something cold settle in her stomach. The Varini were dying right now. 6 billion souls had been killed in 3 days, and these people wanted to write stronger letters. The Korthax had ignored every warning. They laughed at sanctions. Their warlord Kreshtar had broadcast his message clearly. The weak deserved to be conquered. The strong deserved to rule. This was the natural order. "We could deploy a peacekeeping force," offered the Council's military coordinator, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish with silver tendrils. "It would take approximately 6 months to assemble from member species." 6 months. The Varini would be extinct by then. Chen stood up. The motion sensor in her booth activated, requesting permission to speak. A chime sounded and a small light appeared next to the human section on the main board. It would take hours before her turn came in the speaking order. She walked out instead. The doors sealed behind her with a soft hiss. In the hallway, she activated her communication device. "Chen to Earth Command. Begin Protocol Sentinel." "Confirmed, Ambassador," came the reply. "Initiating now." Behind her, the Council continued its debate. They did not notice her absence. Humans were not important enough to notice. Across the galaxy, news networks broadcast the Varini tragedy. Reporters spoke in solemn tones about the terrible loss. Analysts discussed the Korthax threat. Everyone agreed something should be done. No one did anything. The Korthax fleet moved to its next target. Intelligence reports showed their trajectory. They were heading toward the Peltine Collective, a peaceful species spread across 23 worlds. 80 billion lives hung in the balance. The Council scheduled another emergency session for the following week. In human space, 12 colony worlds went dark. Communication arrays stopped transmitting. Trade ships returned to port and did not leave again. Automated systems sent brief messages. Routine maintenance, unexpected technical issues. Scheduled communications blackout for military exercises. Other species barely noticed. Human trade was minimal anyway. Human military was considered primitive. Their ships were small and outdated by galactic standards. Everyone knew humans were emotional creatures, probably scared of the Korthax like everyone else. But deep in the asteroid belts of human systems, something was happening. Foundries that had been built in secret over decades suddenly roared to life. Shipyards hidden in the darkness between planets activated their construction bays. Research facilities that officially did not exist sent streams of data to military headquarters. Humans had been preparing for this moment since they first joined the galactic community. They had watched the Council's endless debates. They had seen how the strong preyed on the weak while everyone else formed committees. They had studied every war, every conflict, every moment when evil was allowed to flourish because good beings did nothing. Earth had learned this lesson the hard way, in their own terrible history. World wars, nuclear weapons, genocides that scarred their collective memory. Humans knew what happened when bullies were appeased, when monsters were given more time, when violence was met with strongly worded letters. Never again, humanity had sworn after their darkest days. Never again would they stand by while innocents died. 47 days after Ambassador Chen walked out of the council chamber, the Korthax issued their ultimatum to the Pelthine. Surrender in 72 hours or die. The Korthax fleet assembled in Pelthine space. 15,000 warships, the largest armada anyone had ever seen. The council convened again. They agreed this was very serious. They formed a special committee to explore military options. The committee would report back in 3 months with recommendations. The Pelthine broadcast their final prayers across the galaxy. They were artists and philosophers. They had no weapons. They had trusted the council to protect them. That trust had been misplaced. As the countdown ticked away, every species watched. They watched with shame. They watched with fear. They watched with helplessness. The Korthax would win, and everyone knew it. Another civilization would fall while the galaxy stood by and did nothing. No one was watching human space. No one saw the fleets that had been built in secret. No one detected the weapons that broke every council regulation. No one understood what was about to happen. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had not been hiding out of fear. They had been preparing for war. The countdown continued. 68 hours until the Korthax deadline. The Pelthine homeworld prepared for the end. In the council chambers, delegates argued about proper procedures. Should they send a strongly worded message first? Should they offer the Korthax territory in exchange for peace? Should they impose trade restrictions that would take effect in 6 months? Ambassador Chen was not there to hear it. She stood in the command center on Luna, Earth's moon, watching holographic displays that showed the entire theater of war. Around her, human military officers moved with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no uncertainty. They had planned for this. Final fleet check, ordered Admiral Marcus Rodriguez, a gray-haired man who had spent 30 years preparing for this moment. Status reports came in one by one.
Strike Group Alpha, ready.
Strike Group Beta, ready. Carriers Nimitz, Eisenhower, and Zhenghe, ready. Dreadnought-class ships Washington, Moscow, and Beijing, ready. The list went on. 8,000 ships, each one built in secret over decades. All fleets report ready for immediate deployment, sir, confirmed the operations officer. Rodriguez nodded. He looked at Chen. Ambassador, this is your decision. Once we move, there is no going back. The galaxy will know what we can do. Chen thought about the Verini. 6 billion dead. She thought about the Pelthine, preparing to die because no one would help them. She thought about her own children back on Earth, and what kind of galaxy she wanted them to inherit. Launch the fleets, she said quietly. Across human space, 8,000 warships activated their engines. They were not like other ships in the galaxy. Human scientists had ignored council regulations about artificial intelligence. They had pushed physics beyond what other species thought possible. They had weaponized theories that alien academics said were just mathematics, not reality. Every ship carried quantum disruption cannons that could tear apart matter at the atomic level, kinetic weapons that accelerated projectiles to 95% of light speed, missile swarms controlled by AI that could think and adapt faster than any biological mind, point defense systems that could track 1 million targets simultaneously. And every ship was crewed by humans who remembered their own history. They remembered what appeasement had cost. They remembered what happened when good people did nothing. The fleets jumped into faster-than-light travel. They would reach Pelthine space in 4 hours. On the Korthax command ship, Warlord Kreshitar reviewed his forces with satisfaction. 15,000 warships, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The Pelthine had no military. The Council had no spine. Victory was certain. Warlord, we are detecting energy signatures, reported his sensor officer. Unknown ships entering the system. The Council's peacekeeping force? Kreshitar laughed. They said 6 months.
Have they finally found courage?
No, sir. The signatures do not match any known Council vessels. Computing. Identification complete. They are human ships. Silence fell across the command bridge. Then Kreshitar began to laugh. It was a deep rumbling sound that made his subordinates uncomfortable. Humans, the emotional weaklings who sit in the back of the council chamber. How many ships? 8,000, sir? We have 15,000. This will be a slaughter. Kreshitar opened a broadcast to his entire fleet. Warriors of the hegemony, the humans have come to play hero. Show them what happens to children who challenge gods. Destroy them all. Across the galaxy, billions watched through FTL communication relays. Every species had access to the same sensor feeds. They saw the human fleet arrive. They saw the massive Korthax Armada move to engage. In the council chamber, delegates stopped their debate. Every screen showed the same thing. The species that considered humans weak and primitive were about to see the truth. The two fleets faced each other across the darkness of space. The Korthax ships were massive and brutal, designed to intimidate. The human ships were sleeker, covered in strange geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. They moved with impossible precision, every vessel perfectly coordinated. Kreshtar broadcast on all frequencies. Human fools, you face the greatest armada in galactic history. Turn back now and we may let your world survive. The human response came from Admiral Rodriguez himself. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Korthax hegemony, you are guilty of genocide and crimes against sapient life. Your fleet will be destroyed. Your government will surrender. This is not a negotiation. This is an execution, Kreshtar roared with laughter. Big words from... He never finished the sentence. The human fleet fired as one. Space itself seemed to tear. Quantum disruption beams lanced across the darkness, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in their effect. Where they touched Korthax ships, hulls simply ceased to exist. Matter unraveled into component particles, then into pure energy. Kinetic kill vehicles crossed the distance in seconds, moving too fast for point defense systems to track. Each impact released the energy of a nuclear weapon. Shields that could withstand conventional weapons meant nothing against projectiles moving at near light speed. Missile swarms launched by the thousands, each warhead guided by an AI that learned and adapted. The Korthax tried to shoot them down, but the missiles split apart, changed course, coordinated their attacks. For every missile destroyed, 3 more got through. Kreshtar watched his fleet die. Ships that had conquered worlds vanished in flashes of light. Warships that had inspired terror across the galaxy became clouds of debris. His sensors could barely track the destruction. It was happening too fast. Return fire, he screamed. All weapons fire. The Korthax fleet unleashed everything: energy beams, missiles, plasma cannons. Enough firepower to sterilize a planet. The human ships barely seemed to notice. Point defense systems intercepted everything. Shields that used technology the Council had never seen absorbed the rest. Not a single human vessel was damaged. 11 minutes after the battle began, it ended. 15,000 Korthax warships had been reduced to wreckage. The human fleet hung in space, untouched, weapons still charged. The galaxy watched in silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Every species that had dismissed humanity as weak and primitive now understood their mistake. Admiral Rodriguez broadcast to the Korthax homeworld. Your fleet is gone. Your military is broken. Surrender now or we will come for you next. You have 1 hour to decide. The Korthax Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for 3 years, surrendered in 43 minutes. The debris field stretched across a light minute of space. Twisted metal, melted hull plating, and the frozen remains of 15,000 warships drifted in the darkness. The largest military fleet in galactic history had become a graveyard in 11 minutes. The Peltine could not believe they were alive. They had prepared for death. They had said their goodbyes. Children had been held by parents for the last time. Now they stood in the streets of their cities, looking up at the sky where human ships patrolled their world. Why? Asked Pelmoth, the Pelthine leader, when Admiral Rodriguez contacted him. Why did you save us? Your council voted to wait. You owed us nothing. Rodriguez looked tired. He had not slept in 3 days. We did not do this because we owed you something. We did this because it was right. The council can debate while people die. Humans cannot. Across the galaxy, every government held emergency meetings. Military analysts frantically reviewed the battle data. The numbers made no sense. Human weapons were decades beyond anything in council space. Their ships moved with coordination that suggested AI far beyond legal limits. Their tactics were flawless, ruthless, efficient. How did we not know? Demanded the Zeltari military commander, his 3 heads each showing a different expression of shock. How did they hide this? His intelligence officer looked at the reports with dismay. They built everything in deep space, far from shipping lanes. They mined asteroids. They used dark foundries that produced no detectable emissions. Every human colony contributed. They have been preparing for decades. Preparing for what? War with us? No, sir. I think they were preparing for this exact situation. For the moment when the council failed to act. They built an intervention force. In the council chamber, panic spread like wildfire. The species that had dismissed humanity now faced an uncomfortable truth. Humans had the power to destroy any of them, all of them perhaps, and no one had seen it coming. The Minervan delegate stood, her crystalline body flashing with agitated colors. We must demand they disarm. This concentration of military power threatens the entire council. Threaten them with what? Asked the Zeltari representative quietly. Did you see what they did to the Korthax? Could your fleet last even 5 minutes against them? Silence answered him. Ambassador Chen appeared on the main display. She had not requested permission to speak. She simply took over every screen in the chamber, broadcasting from the Luna Command Center. Members of the council, she began, her voice echoing through the hall. I know you are afraid. I know you have questions. I know some of you are already planning to contain or eliminate the human threat. She paused, letting that sink in. Let me save you some time. Yes, we built this fleet in secret. Yes, we violated your regulations on artificial intelligence and weapons research. Yes, we could have told you. We chose not to. Angry voices erupted from multiple delegations. Chen waited for them to quiet. We chose not to because you would have stopped us. You would have formed committees. You would have debated. You would have talked about the danger of advanced weapons while the Korthax continued killing, and more beings would have died while you discussed proper procedures. You had no right, shouted someone from the crowd. We had every right, Chen replied, her voice hard. We have the right to build whatever we need to defend ourselves. We have the right to help those who cannot help themselves, and we have the right to act when others will not. She leaned forward and her eyes seemed to look at each delegate individually. The Korthax Empire still exists. They have 47 systems, millions of soldiers, weapons facilities on a dozen worlds, and they still hold 3 species as slaves. Your council was going to negotiate with them. Ask them nicely to free their captives. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We are not going to ask. The transmission ended. Across human space, fleets moved with frightening speed. They appeared simultaneously at every major Korthax world. Not to conquer, not to colonize, but to disarm. Military installations were targeted with surgical precision. Weapons factories vanished in controlled strikes. Warship construction yards were reduced to slag. The Korthax government broadcast surrender, but the human fleets did not stop. They continued their work methodically, dismantling the entire Korthax military infrastructure. Civilian areas were untouched. Cities were not bombed. Populations were not harmed. Human medical ships arrived at conquered worlds, offering aid to the species the Korthax had enslaved. A Varini survivor, one of the few who escaped the bombardment, stood in a refugee camp when human soldiers arrived. She expected more violence, more death. Instead, they brought food, medicine, and engineers to help rebuild. Why are you helping us? She asked a young human medic who was treating her injuries. The medic looked surprised by the question. Because you need help. Is there supposed to be another reason? On the Korthax homeworld, Warlord Kreshitar sat in his palace watching his empire collapse. Human ships held orbit above every major city. His military was gone. His fleet was destroyed. And yet no human had set foot on his world. No bombs had fallen on his cities. A communication request came through. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the screen. Warlord Kreshitar, your military is dismantled. Your ability to wage war is gone. Your captive species are being freed as we speak. You have a choice now. You can surrender peacefully, stand trial for your crimes, and your people will be allowed to rebuild in peace. Or you can resist and we will remove you by force. You have 1 hour. Kreshitar looked at the human admiral. He saw no anger, no hatred. Just cold certainty. You are not even enjoying this, are you? Kreshitar asked. You do not conquer for glory. No, Rodriguez replied. We do not. We fight because we must. We win because we prepared. And we stop when the threat is ended. That is the difference between us and you. Kreshitar surrendered in 30 minutes. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. In less than a week, humanity had done what the Council could not do in 3 years. They had stopped the Korthax. They had freed the enslaved. They had restored order, and they had done it without asking permission. In the council chamber, the delegates finally understood. Humanity had not been hiding in the back because they were weak. They had been watching, learning, preparing. The question now was simple and terrifying. What would humanity do next? 3 days after the Korthak's surrender, Ambassador Chen received a summons to appear before the full council. It was not a request. It was a demand. She was to explain humanity's actions, submit to questioning, and accept whatever judgment the council decreed. She came alone. The council chamber was packed. Every species sent their highest-ranking delegates. Security forces lined the walls, though everyone understood they were useless if humans decided to fight. The mood was equal parts fear and anger. Chen walked to the speaker's platform in the center. Above her, 10,000 representatives watched, some with open hostility, others with barely concealed terror, a few with something that might have been respect. The council speaker, an ancient being from a species whose name humans could not pronounce, activated the amplification system. Its voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder. Ambassador Chen, humanity stands accused of multiple violations of galactic law, unauthorized military buildup, development of prohibited artificial intelligence, deployment of weapons of mass destruction, and most serious unilateral military action without council authorization. How do you answer these charges? Chen looked up at the thousands of faces watching her. She spoke clearly without apology, guilty, on all counts, shocked silence. They had expected denials, justifications, excuses, not immediate admission. However, Chen continued, I would like to point out that while we violated your laws, you violated something more important. You violated your responsibility to protect the innocent. Angry voices erupted. The speaker called for order, and the noise gradually subsided. The Vareni had 6 billion dead before you finished your first emergency session, Chen said. The Pelthine were hours from extinction while you debated proper procedures. 3 species live as slaves while you discuss diplomatic solutions with their owners. You have committees. You have protocols. You have 50,000 years of tradition. She paused, and her voice grew cold. And the Korthaks had 3 years to kill, conquer, and enslave without consequence. Your laws were more important than their victims. Your procedures were more sacred than innocent lives. You had no authority, shouted the Minervan delegate. We had the only authority that matters, Chen replied. We had the ability to help and the will to act. You had committees. The Zeltari military commander stood. You have destabilized the galactic order. You have demonstrated military superiority that threatens every species here. You have shown that any human disagreement could result in our destruction. How are we supposed to trust you? Chen nodded. That is a fair question. Let me tell you about Earth's history. She activated a holographic display. Images appeared above her. Cities in ruins, mushroom clouds rising, mass graves, war memorials. 500 years ago, my species nearly destroyed itself. We had weapons that could end all life on our world. We came within minutes of using them. Multiple times, the images changed, showed recovery, rebuilding, unity. We survived because we learned. We learned that strength without restraint leads to destruction. That power without responsibility leads to tyranny. That the ability to destroy means nothing without the wisdom to know when not to. She looked around the chamber. We did not join the galactic community as conquerors. We joined as students. We watched how you handled conflict. We studied your methods, and we realized that your long peace had made you forget something important. What? Asked the speaker. Evil exists, and it does not respond to strongly worded letters. Chen pulled up footage from the Korthak's surrender. We could have destroyed their worlds. We could have killed billions in revenge for what they did. We had the power. We had the justification. But we did not. We dismantled their military. We freed their slaves. We offered medical aid, and then we stopped. She let that sink in. You fear our power. I understand. But judge us by our actions, not your fears. We did not conquer the Korthaks. We did not take their territory. We did not enslave their population. We stopped a genocide, and then we went home. A small delegate from a species Chen did not recognize spoke up. But what happens the next time you disagree with the council? What happens when it is us you are fighting? Chen met the delegate's eyes. Then you will have become like the Korthaks, and you will deserve what they got. The bluntness of the statement shocked the chamber into silence. Let me be clear, Chen continued. We did not build this fleet to control you. We built it to protect you even from yourselves. Your system failed. It failed the Vareni. It failed the Pelthine. It would have failed the next victims and the ones after that. We refused to let that happen again. She pulled up a document and transmitted it to every delegate. This is the Geneva Accords, adapted for galactic civilization. It defines war crimes. It establishes rules of engagement. It creates automatic triggers for intervention. Most importantly, it has enforcement mechanisms. You want to change our laws? The speaker asked. No, we are going to change them, with or without your approval. These accords are now human law. Any species that engages in genocide, slavery, or wars of aggression will face immediate human military response. No warnings, no delays, no debates. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted over each other. Some called it tyranny. Others called it necessary. Many simply looked afraid. Chen waited for silence. We are not asking permission, she said quietly, and somehow her voice carried through the noise. We are informing you of reality. The galaxy has changed. The age of talking while beings die is over. This is dictatorship, someone yelled. No, Chen replied. Dictatorship is when you impose your will on the innocent. This is justice. Ask the Pelthine if they feel oppressed by our intervention. Ask the freed slaves if we are tyrants. She began to walk toward the exit, then stopped and turned back. The council can continue as before. Debate, discuss, form committees. We will not interfere with your politics. But understand this. The next time a species begins genocide, we will not ask your permission to stop it. The next time a warlord threatens innocence, we will not wait for you to find your courage. We will act immediately, decisively, and without apology. Chen left the chamber. Behind her, 10,000 species finally understood. The galaxy had a new sheriff, and humanity did not care about procedure. In the following weeks, 3 minor conflicts ended suddenly. Species that had been preparing for war looked at their fleets, looked at what humanity had done to the Korthax, and chose peace instead. The council began rewriting its charter, not because humanity demanded it, but because they finally understood that their old ways had led to preventable tragedies. And in human space, the fleets remained ready, watching, waiting, hoping they would never be needed again, but prepared to act the moment they were. 5 years passed. The galaxy transformed in ways that surprised everyone. The Pelthine rebuilt their civilization with human help. Advanced technology flowed freely. Human engineers taught them new construction methods. Human doctors shared medical knowledge. Within 3 years, their population was growing again. They built a monument at the site where the Korthax fleet had been destroyed. It was a simple pillar of light visible from orbit with words in 1,000 languages. To humanity, who answered when no one else would. Ambassador Chen stood before it during the dedication ceremony. Pelmoth, now elderly but still leading his people, placed a hand on her shoulder. We have no word in our language for what you did, he said. Rescue is too small. Salvation is too religious. We simply call it the answering. When we needed someone, you answered. Chen felt tears in her eyes. We only wish we could have come sooner. For the Virini, for all who died before we acted. You came when others would not, Pelmoth replied. That is enough. The Korthax Empire had been broken up. Their worlds were independent now, each choosing their own government. Some chose democracy, others chose different paths. But none chose military conquest. The lesson had been learned too well. Kreshitar himself stood trial at a specially convened court. Not a human court. The freed species insisted on judging him themselves. He was found guilty of genocide and crimes against sapient life. His sentence was life imprisonment, but in conditions that met human standards for prisoner treatment. Even monsters deserved basic dignity, humans insisted. The council had changed. The Geneva Accords were not officially adopted, but every species began following them anyway. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of human intervention. Wars still happened, but they followed rules now. Civilians were protected. Prisoners were treated humanely. Genocide became unthinkable. Some species resented the change. They called it human imperialism. They said humanity had appointed themselves the galaxy's police without asking. They were not wrong, Chen knew. But she also knew what happened when no one policed evil. The test came in the 4th year after the Korthax defeat. A species called the Dreth, from the outer rim of the galaxy, began systematically eliminating a minority population on their worlds. They called it cultural purification. They claimed it was an internal matter. The council convened to discuss appropriate responses. A single human dreadnought, the UHSS Vigilance, appeared in orbit of the Dreth homeworld, 16 hours after the first reports reached human space. Captain James Morrison broadcast on all frequencies. Dreth government, you are engaged in ethnic cleansing. This is a violation of the Geneva Accords. You have 1 hour to cease all actions and surrender those responsible for trial. If you do not comply, we will disable your military infrastructure and extract the perpetrators by force. The Dreth leader appeared on screen, tentacles writhing with anger. You have no authority here, human. We are sovereign. This is our world, our people, our business. Morrison's response was calm. You are correct that this is your world, but those you are killing are also people. Their lives are not your business to end. 53 minutes remaining. The Dreth cut the transmission. They scrambled their fleet, 1,200 warships, to engage the single human vessel. They broadcast to the galaxy that they would show humanity the cost of arrogance. The Vigilance disabled all 1,200 ships in 7 minutes. Not destroyed, disabled. Engines dead, weapons offline, but crews alive. Then it deployed strike teams to the surface, extracted the government officials responsible for the purge, and left. Total human casualties, 0. Total Dreth casualties, 17. All of them guards who opened fire first. The galaxy watched. And understood. Humanity meant what they said. Every word. Every promise. Every threat. After that, the ethnic cleansing stopped. Not just with the Dreth, everywhere. Species that had been considering similar actions quietly decided against it. Minor conflicts that might have escalated into massacres were resolved peacefully instead, not because everyone suddenly became moral, but because everyone knew humanity was watching. Chen met with Admiral Rodriguez in the Luna Command Center. 5 years after the Korthax fell. We have become what we promised we would not be, Rodriguez said, looking at the strategic display showing human fleet positions across the galaxy. We are the enforcers. The muscle. The threat that keeps order. Yes, Chen agreed. But look at what we have prevented. 3 potential genocides stopped before they started. 14 wars ended through negotiation because both sides knew we would not allow conquest. 27 million slaves freed. How many lives is our reputation worth? Rodriguez nodded slowly. I know, but I worry. What happens when we fail? What happens when we cannot respond fast enough? Or when we make the wrong decision? Then we will have to live with that, Chen said. Just like we have to live with not saving the Verini. We are not gods. We cannot save everyone, but we can save those we can reach. She pulled up a transmission that had come in that morning, a request from a small species called the Thren. They were being threatened by a neighboring empire. They asked if humanity would protect them. What do we tell them? Rodriguez asked. Chen thought about the monument on the Peltine homeworld. She thought about the freed slaves who sent messages of thanks. She thought about the lives saved and the wars prevented. We tell them yes, she said. We tell them we will come if they need us. Because that is what we do, we answer. Across the galaxy, humanity maintained its vigil. Fleet bases were established in strategic locations, always watching, always ready. Human officers trained soldiers from other species in modern warfare and, more importantly, in restraint and rules of engagement. Some called it an empire. Others called it protection. Humanity called it responsibility. The Council continued its work, now with actual enforcement behind its resolutions. Humans still sat in the back section, but everyone listened when they spoke. They did not dominate discussions. They did not need to. The threat of human intervention hung over every debate like a sword, but it was a sword that was rarely drawn. Most species chose cooperation over conflict, not because they loved peace, but because the alternative was too costly. In the decade after the Korthax defeat, galactic deaths from war dropped by 97%. Slavery became extinct in Council space. Genocide disappeared entirely. The galaxy became safer, more peaceful, more just, and humanity maintained its fleets, hoping they would rust from disuse but knowing they probably would not. Chen visited the Peltine monument one last time before retiring from her position as ambassador. She was old now, gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent 10 years as humanity's voice to the galaxy, and another 5 helping to enforce the new order. A young Peltine approached her, barely old enough to remember the invasion. Ambassador Chen, I have a question, the child said. Why did humanity help us? My teacher says you broke your own council's rules, that you risked war with everyone. Why would you do that for strangers? Chen knelt down to the child's level. Because we could, and because it was right. Sometimes those are the only reasons that matter. Will you always protect us? The child asked. Chen smiled. We will always try, and when someone needs help, when someone cries out in the darkness, humanity will answer. That is our promise. That is who we decided to be. She looked up at the monument, at the pillar of light reaching toward the stars. The galaxy watched in silence once, she said quietly. They watched while beings died, while empires fell, while monsters prowled. But humanity refused to be silent. We refused to watch while we could act. That is the difference. That is why we are here. The child nodded, not fully understanding but sensing the importance. Chen stood and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the darkness. Somewhere, a potential tragedy was being prevented. Somewhere, innocents were sleeping safely because humanity stood guard. They had mistaken humanity's patience for weakness, their diplomacy for cowardice. By the time they understood their error, their fleets were already ash, scattered among the stars they had sought to conquer, and the galaxy, which had once ruled by committee and debate, now lived under a new truth. Evil could exist, but it would not prosper, because humanity was watching, and humanity always answered.